My story should have been buried forever, but for some reason the feeling of guilt haunts me every time I look in the mirror. I always wonder if I can go on living without leaving these scars on my soul. It all started out small, seemingly harmless, but then everything gradually turned into a spiral that I couldn't escape. My name is Alex Mitchell, 22 years old, living in California, USA. Currently, I am a senior at a local university. On a normal day, I attend morning classes and go home in the late afternoon. Everything in my life seems to follow a normal path, but there are invisible gaps that no one else sees but me. My mother passed away when I was 10 years old. At that time, I was still too young to truly understand the loss. The pain gradually seeped in as I grew older. A strange feeling of absence every time I looked at other families with mothers by my side. But then my father, Richard Mitchell, remarried a few years later. The new woman in our family, Sophia, entered my life with beauty and intelligence, and almost unbelievable perfection. At first, I didn't know how I felt about her. I still remember feeling uncomfortable whenever she was around, a strangeness that I had never experienced with my own mother. Over time, things gradually changed. Sophia was not only a beautiful woman, she was also intelligent and skillful in her approach to life. Slowly, she gained my respect. My father was often busy with work, and whenever he was away, Sophia was the one at home taking care of everything. We started talking more, sharing more, and I began to feel a connection that I had never imagined I would have with a stepmother. I started calling her mom, and while the word felt strange at first, it gradually became more natural. Every day when she came home from school, she would ask about me, worry about me, and we gradually had longer conversations. Sophia became an integral part of the family, and although there was distance at first, our relationship gradually became as close as that of a real mother and son. Our life, at least on the surface, was stable and peaceful. My father, Richard Mitchell, was a successful businessman. He owned his own company, and his job required dedication and long business trips. For me, it was normal for him to be away from home. When I was a child, I used to feel lonely when he was away, but gradually I got used to it. Sometimes his absence even made the house more peaceful. I think Sophia sensed it too, even though she never said it. Sophia was perfect in her role. She knew how to keep everything organized and neat. From taking care of the house to preparing meals for me and Dad, she always made things run smoothly, without any fault. In Dad's eyes, Sophia was the ideal wife. She was beautiful, smart, and always knew how to please him. Sometimes I wondered if he really knew her, because there was something my dad never knew, and probably never imagined the truth behind the perfect facade of our family. I was still single at that time. Although I had had a few relationships in the past, nothing deep enough for me to think about long term. Most of my relationships stopped at dating for a few months and then broke up. Most of the time, I am busy with my studies and student life. Although the house is quite big and I can go out to meet friends whenever I want, I usually choose to stay at home to focus on my studies, as well as help Sophia with small things around the house. Sophia and I have a good relationship. When she first came, after my father remarried, I felt a bit strange and a little wary. But gradually, things changed. Sophia is not only smart and understanding, but she also knows how to share and listen. There were evenings when the two of us sat down to dinner together while Dad was away on business, and we talked about the little things in life. Our relationship progressed from being distant to a closeness that I had never expected. However, that closeness was not always comfortable. There were moments when we sat next to each other, and I felt a strange atmosphere. Sometimes Sophia's eyes looked at me in a way that I could not explain. It was not the look of a stepmother looking at her son, but something deeper, more complicated. I always reassured myself that it was just me thinking too much. But then, that feeling could not be easily ignored. However, everything continued as usual. I did not think much about those strange moments, because our daily life was so stable. Sophia was still a thoughtful woman, a kind stepmother that I could rely on. I still went to school, came home in the late afternoons, and sometimes we had quiet dinners together. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. But beneath that perfect surface, There were things that I knew my father would never see. There were those awkward moments between Sophia and me, those unexplainable glances and emotions that were hard to pin down. He never knew about it, never sensed the small tension that lurked beneath the surface of our peaceful family life. As the days went on, I continued my life, trying to ignore the mixed emotions that I didn't dare face. I thought things would continue as they were stable, calm, and unchanging. But as October 18th approached, I had no idea that things would soon change forever, in a way I could never have imagined. That evening, when I returned home earlier than usual after a night of studying, I felt that the atmosphere in the house was a little different. The atmosphere was not as quiet as usual. Standing at the door, I heard a light laugh from the living room, a chuckle, and somewhat intimate. This made me curious. Sophia rarely received guests when my father was away, and I had never heard her laugh like that. I walked closer, wondering what was going on. When I looked through the crack in the door, the scene before me shocked me. Sophia, the woman I had always respected as a mother, was sitting close to a strange man on the sofa. Their hands were intertwined, and her lips were smiling slightly, her eyes looking at the man lovingly. They were whispering something to each other. The words I couldn't hear clearly, but their actions were unmistakable. The intimacy between the two people could not be mistaken. It was clearly an extramarital affair. My whole body froze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Sophia, the woman I trusted, the woman I had called mother all these years, was having an affair. While my father was away on a business trip, she was brazenly here, with another man, right in our own home. The shock hit me. I stood there, unable to speak. My heart was pounding in my chest, each beat threatening to break the silence of the night. My hands were shaking, trying to hold onto the door to keep myself from collapsing. I didn't know what to do. The shock seemed to be rising inside me, blocking all thought. The scene before me was like a nightmare, but it was so real. Suddenly, Sophia turned and met my eyes. I waited for a reaction from her, perhaps confusion, panic, or at least a little guilt. But no, instead she just smiled, a calm, natural smile that was frightening. Her eyes held no worry, no panic, but a strange calmness. At that moment, my confusion grew even greater. Why was she smiling? Why was there no remorse? I really didn't know how to react. Run away? Scream? I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. I was forced into a situation that I was not prepared for. Standing face to face with the woman I had always thought was perfect, now standing before me with a terrible secret. I was completely overwhelmed. Sophia slowly stood up and walked towards me. I felt my body stiffen, unable to move, as if paralyzed by what I had just witnessed. When she stood before me, the distance between us was so close that I could feel her breathing. Her voice was soft, like she was whispering to a child. "Alex, there's no need to make a big deal out of this. We can keep it a secret, just between you and Mom." Her words were like a blow to my mind. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't apologetic, it wasn't an apology, it wasn't a plea for forgiveness, it was an offer. Sophia didn't just want me to keep her affair a secret, she was inviting me into this forbidden relationship. Every word that came out of her mouth shocked me more. Why? How could she think I would agree to such a thing? Two conflicting emotions were tearing at me. One part of me knew clearly that this was wrong, that I couldn't betray my father in this way. Sophia was my father's wife, the person he loved and trusted. Any action beyond that would be an unforgivable betrayal. I knew that, but my reason seemed clouded by the turmoil within me. The temptation was clear and strong. I had always been attracted to Sophia, but I had never thought that this would lead to such a situation. Before, I had always tried to deny or ignore any unusual feelings I had for her. But now, with that dangerous proposition coming from her own mouth, I could not pretend that I did not feel the attraction. It was a strong feeling, not just physical, but also of closeness, of the connection that Sophia and I had built over time. My mind was spinning, unable to think clearly. I was caught in a tangle of morality and desire, of duty and desire. Part of me wanted to run away from the situation, to keep my relationship with my father intact, But another part of me wanted to test the boundaries, to see what would happen if I didn't say no. I was stuck, not knowing which path to take, and it was completely exhausting. After that night, my relationship with Sophia entered a dark place that I never thought I would experience. Everything I had ever known about stability, about a normal family, disappeared in an instant. We entered a secret relationship, trying to keep everything secret, away from my father's eyes. The temptation from Sophia was too strong for me to resist, and every time I tried to stop, she always found a way to pull me back. During the day, we still acted like normal. In front of my father, everything seemed the same. I was still the sensible son, and Sophia was still the caring, gentle stepmother. Family meals became stressful for me. Every time my father praised Sophia for her diligence, I could only sit still, trying to keep my true feelings from showing. Looking into my father's eyes, my heart was wrenched with guilt. I was betraying him, and it was like a sharp knife cutting deep into my conscience every day. At night, when the lights were dimmed and the house fell silent, the taboo between us took place again. No one knew, no one saw, but I knew. I knew that this relationship was wrong, but at the same time, I could not resist its attraction. Every time I thought of ending it, Sophia only needed a look, a whisper, and I would collapse under her power. She was a smart and charming woman, and she knew how to manipulate my emotions, how to play with the weaknesses that I could not control. The feeling of guilt weighed on me more and more. I could not sleep at night. The nightmares of betrayal, of my father finding out, haunted me every time I closed my eyes. Every morning when I woke up, I looked in the mirror and saw a different person, a person I no longer recognized. I used to be proud of my morality, of always doing the right thing. But now I was a liar, a traitor, and that made me lose myself. Every time I saw my father, his smile, the trust he had in me and Sophia, I felt like I was being beaten down all over again. He had no idea that the wife he trusted, the son he loved, was betraying him day by day. I felt like I was standing between two worlds, one world of duty and responsibility to my father, and another world of dangerous temptation with Sophia. Things couldn't be hidden forever, and the cruel truth was finally revealed on the day I least expected it. One afternoon, while Sophia and I were in the room, my father came home earlier than expected. I didn't hear the door open, didn't hear his footsteps on the floor. We were so caught up in the forbidden feeling that everything was about to change forever. Suddenly, the sound of the bedroom door being pushed open startled Sophia and me. In front of me was my father, his eyes wide, unable to believe what was happening before his eyes. Sophia and I were lying on the bed, entangled with each other. The scene was impossible to misunderstand. He stood there for a few seconds, his eyes shifting from surprise to pain to anger. I couldn't say anything, and Sophia couldn't say anything either. The silence stretched for a few seconds like hours. Then my father spoke, his voice full of anger and uncontrollable. "What the hell is going on here?" he almost shouted. Neither Sophia nor I answered, because how could we justify our actions? There were no words to explain this betrayal. We stood there, literally and figuratively naked, facing the stark truth of our actions. The argument that followed was an inevitable storm. My father could not believe that his wife and son could do this to him. His screams echoed throughout the house, each word a knife stabbing straight into me, straight into the heart he had loved and trusted. "Why? How could you do this?" he screamed, the pain and anger on his face. Sophia stood silently, her eyes filled with tears, but no words could heal the wound we had just caused. I could not answer either. How could I explain that I had been drawn into a relationship that I could not escape? Every excuse was meaningless. I looked at him, but could not find the words. At that moment, I realized that this betrayal had gone too far, had crossed all boundaries. My father demanded an explanation from Sophia and me, but no answer could appease his anger. Sophia tried to speak, but her voice was choked with tears. I just stood there, speechless, feeling the waves of anger from my father. I wanted to say something, but no words were strong enough to erase this guilt. In my father's eyes, I had become the worst traitor, not just a son, but a destroyer of the family. The argument continued. The screams echoed throughout the house. My father could not contain his disappointment, the pain of realizing that his family had been destroyed by his own son. He hissed in anger, calling me the most traitorous son he had ever trusted. There was nothing more to say, nothing to salvage the situation. After that tense confrontation, my father made his final decision. He looked at me, his face stern and cold, and told me that I was no longer his son. "You are no longer worthy of this house, of my love. Go away," he roared. Those words were like a death sentence, ending everything that remained between me and my father. In an instant, everything that I had considered stable, that I had believed would last forever, collapsed. My father kicked me out of the house without a moment's hesitation. He could not bear my presence any longer. Sophia tried to intervene, but my father pushed her away, as if she were a stranger of no value to him. I left the house where I had grown up, a heavy burden of guilt on my shoulders. I knew I had to face the consequences of my wrong choices, but that didn't lessen the pain of losing my family, losing the trust of the father I once loved. I wanted to end it all many times, telling myself that I couldn't go on like this. But every time I thought about it, I remembered the moments with Sophia, her charm, and I couldn't pull away. I knew that this relationship couldn't last. It was like a tornado, pulling me deeper every day, and I didn't know how to get out. Every day, the feeling of being stuck and guilty became heavier. Sophia didn't seem to be affected as much as I was. She always maintained a calm demeanor, as if everything was under control. This only made me more confused. How could she live so comfortably while I was torn apart by betrayal? I couldn't understand her, and that made things more confusing and uncomfortable. Day by day, I gradually realized that I couldn't continue living like this. I couldn't keep lying to my dad, couldn't keep letting myself get caught up in this forbidden relationship. But even knowing that, I couldn't find a way to end it. Sophia's temptation, the guilt, and the fear of being discovered kept swirling around me, keeping me trapped in a vicious cycle with no way out.